Charlene Strong.
So I'm not sure that I was prepared for the flood of emotions that overcame me when I was holding my father as he died. You see, we hadn't had the best relationship. And the hardest part about that was this darkness that I kept thinking would get better. And it didn't. In fact, it got worse because I never heard the words that I was looking for. I'm sorry I abused you. And so when my father died, I laid him back for the first time in a month, and all the machines were quiet, and I was suddenly alone with him. And I took his St. Christopher medal off to give to my mom, and I waited for the funeral director to come pick his body up. And I looked at him and I said, I gotta make some changes. And so I promised to myself that when I went back home, I would be making some changes. I wasn't quite sure what that was gonna be. So I hopped a plane back to Seattle to my husband. And I decided that one of the things that would make me feel good was to start volunteering for the Humane Society. So I actually got roped into designing a clinic for people who were financially disabled by HIV/AIDS. And I had many volunteers. And one of the volunteers happened to be this woman that I instantly found to be engaging and a blast. And her name was Kate. And we became fast and furious friends. And I found that when we were doing stuff for the clinic and stuff, that when I was with her, I was having the ball, just a ball. And then I found myself, when I wasn't with her, all I could do was wonder, well, I wonder what Kate's doing today, and thinking about Kate. And so one of the meetings we had, I asked her if after the meeting we could go sit and have a talk afterward, and she said, oh, sure. And I'm sure in her mind she was thinking, she needs to talk about her dad again. And so we pull up into the beautiful park up on top of Queen Anne, Cary Park, many of you know it, and it's got this stunning view. And I'm in my 81 Volvo station wagon. I turn it off, and it doesn't want to turn off. It just keeps going. And I'm like, this is great. And so finally, after it stops making its noise, I look at her and I said, I need to tell you something. And she says, what's that? And I said, I'm gay. And she goes, oh, okay. And I said, but there's another part to this. And she said, and what is that? And I said, well, I'm finding myself caring for you. And she goes, oh. And I said, and she was like, and I waited to hear what she had to say, and she said, well, let me ask you one question. If I said no to this whole idea, would you still be gay? And I said, oh, absolutely. So I went home that night to my husband, and I told him. I said, I'm gay. And that's another story. But I set off on my new adventure, and I moved into an apartment, and I found myself spending more time at Kate's apartment that I, in true lesbian fashion, packed up my U-Haul and moved right into her 400 square foot apartment. And it was great, because I had always felt this just deep, deep sadness and this darkness in my heart that I wasn't being the person that I knew I was and that I knew I could be. And all of a sudden, I kind of was like, well, this is kind of fun. And we had game night, and I thought, that's great. So we have a bunch of friends over, and we have two teams, and we're playing this game called Taboo. And so the game in Taboo is that you have a word above the line, and then you have 5 words below the line that you don't want your team to say, or they don't get the word. And so I go, and I'm very, very sick with a respiratory infection. I sound like the Queen of England, and I go, I am often this. And in rapid-fire succession, I hear, sick, tired, pissed off, angry. And I'm like, no, I'm clumsy. And it was this moment of clarity. I thought, am I sick, tired, pissed off, and angry? Could be. And so then I realized that 400 square feet had its limitations, especially when you have gas. And I had just one of those nights. And so I said, I'm going to bed, which was across the room. And well, it started to get worse, and she comes walking by, and it was like, and I was trying to find something to say really quick, and I went, sorry, I pooted, I coughed, and I tooted. And she walks by without missing a beat, and she goes, Dr. Seuss, get out of my bed, you fluty-flute-fluted. And that was just the way it was. We laughed, and it was really starting to affect this darkness and this pain. So, much to my surprise, she said, hey, I really want you to spend the rest of your life with me, because I too am finding that I'm caring for you. And I said, you bet. And so she said, I know the church doesn't really want us to do that, so why don't we make up our own kind of pre-marriage counseling? And I said, great idea. So one weekend we decided we would write down our top five core values. Easy enough. She goes to that side of the room, I go to that side of the room. And we come back, and I go, you go first. And she goes, number 1, always be kind. And I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Because my number 4 was be kind when you can. And there was really nowhere to go from there. And she just looked at me like, oh, honey. But she just knew that was just me, and it didn't matter, and it didn't matter every day. And so we bought this house, and it was perfect because she was able to record her audiobooks, which she did quite well. And I worked and I worked and I worked on this house, and I made it this beautiful little cottage in the woods at 538 30th Avenue East. And I was loving it, and my heart was starting to feel some light, and I'm like, I'm digging this. And then something happened that is quite unimaginable. A very bad storm came into Seattle, and it was much like a hurricane in my mind. They actually called it an Asian cyclone, and it had a lot of rain. And I had walked home that evening from work with my brother, and I stopped in at his house because I was completely drenched from head to toe. And I was waiting for Kate to finish a business meeting, and then she was going to come pick me up a mile away at my brother's house. And then I get a phone call from her, and she says, I need you to come home. There's water coming in the basement. And I went, what? So I just quickly got dressed, and I said to my brother, I said, I got to go. There's water coming in the basement. He's like, do you want me to come? And I said, no, just wait here. And so I start running home, and then I get another phone call. And she sounds concerned, and she says, how far away are you? And I said, sweetie, I'm running as fast as I can go. What's up? And she said, and I'm kind of annoyed that she's calling me, and I'm running, and I'm drenched, and I'm, and in true fashion. And she says, something has fallen in front of the door, and I can't get out. And I said, I'm almost there. And I start hauling ass. And I round the corner on our street, and I can't imagine what I'm seeing. There's water everywhere. And there's this whitewater rapid coming down our street on the side there. And my neighbor is trapped in their house and telling me, Kate's in there. And I open the front door, and my little dog Pepper comes out and is swimming in the street. My dog is swimming in the street, and I'm like, what the? And so I grab her, and I put her on the couch, and I hear Kate calling for me. But all I can hear is water, 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 just rushing water. And I run down the stairs, and she says, I need you to get me out. I need you to be my hero and get me out. So I start removing the pins on the doors, and water's here. And I get to the third one, and I can't budge it. I'm like, and I run up the stairs, and I grab a knife off of the butcher block. And I run back down, and I think I can cut through the sheetrock. And then the water goes over my head. And I'm in there too. And I get out. And I run upstairs, and I think there's a heater vent. I'll just stomp through that heater vent, and I'll get her head out, and I'll hold her there until the firefighters come. And then I realize that's not going to work. So I run outside, and I'm like, somebody help me. And there was no one in the world. It was like I was the only person left on this earth. And I'm screaming, and I can't believe it's my screams. I've never heard myself scream like that. And this man comes running across the street, and I said, I need your cell phone. My cell phone went underwater. And he hands me a cell phone, and I call my brother, and I say, Jeff, Kate's drowning. Get here now. And he shows up. And then the fire truck comes. And then there's a dive team. A dive team. And they wind up pulling me out of the house because I'm hypothermic, and they take me next door to put clothes on of my neighbor's kid. And Jeff is in there, and the firefighters have to cut the entire floor out of our bedroom. And a firefighter jumps in the water and finds her and brings her out. And Jeff comes running at me, and he says, they've got her breathing. They're taking her to Harborview. And I go, let's go. And we get in the car, and he's driving like a maniac. And I'm like, Jeff, don't kill me before I get there. And he's going up streets the wrong way and on sidewalks, and he gets me there, and I just take out of the car. Now, mind you, I look a little crazy because I have these huge sweats and size 13 boys high-top basketball shoes. And my hair is caked with mud. And I get to the door of the hospital, and I'm wanting to get back to her at the emergency room. This woman says, and who are you? And I said, I'm Charlene. I'm Kate's partner. I need to get in there now. And she says, well, no, wait a minute. Now, just hold on a second. And I'm thinking, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. I need to get in there. Who the hell are you? And she says, we need to get someone on the phone that will allow you to be in there. And by this time, Jeff's standing by me, and I'm looking at him like, am I hearing a different language? Is this woman speaking English? I don't understand her all of a sudden. And what I realize she's saying is, I don't count. So I find a cell phone, and I have to call information, and I don't know how to spell Kate's sister's married last name. So I'm like, no, it's R-U-E-S. No, it's R-E-U. And I finally get it, and I say, Maud, you got to tell him I got to get in there. And I hand this phone over, and it was like, wait a minute. You'll take the word of a cell phone over me standing here who's had 10 years of their life with this person. And I get to her. And they tell me it's not good. And so they move her to ICU, and they say, are you staying the night? And I said, you couldn't pry me off. And then she died. And I said, I want you to take the intubation tube out, please. And the nurse said, I can't. And I said, let me say it again. I want you to take the intubation tube out. And she said, Charlene, we can't. And I said, you don't understand. I need to kiss her goodbye. And I said, can you at least get me a priest? We can't find a priest. Can you get me some oil? And they bring in this jar, and it's the most beautiful green jar, and it has oil. And so I do what a priest should have done. I anoint her head and her hands and her feet, and then I just lay my head on her chest, and the darkness comes back. And I'm like, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. How could you do this to me? It wasn't enough. And so I thought, I'm mad. I got to do something. And so I told the Senate here, and I said, you got to hear me, because this has got to stop. And they heard me. And they passed the law in our state 2-1 that we get rights. But it wasn't enough. And I met the president. And I got to go meet Governor Gregoire in her office, and we talked, and I kept meeting all these celebrities, and I kept traveling all over, and I made a documentary film, and and then all of a sudden, in the midst of this envelope shows up, and it says the city of Seattle. I'm like, what the hell? So I open it, and there's a disc, and it says 911 recordings. I'm like, oh, hell. And I refused to open it, and my brother's like, don't listen to it. My therapist, my friends, everyone's like, don't listen to the tape. And I'm like, all right. And I'm just going through the motions, trying to see if I can do something about this darkness that's just eating me. And her aunt calls me after the signing of the bill to tell me how proud she is of me. And she was the aunt that had officiated our wedding. She had been a nun for 16 years. And she said, Charlene, you know what? She said, I wanted you to know that I kept every single email that Kate ever wrote me. And in one of them, Kate said that she had a mantra that she would say to herself before she went on the stage. I said, well, what is it? She said, Kate would say to herself, be a light, be a flame, be a beacon. And I thought, I know, she was a light and a flame and a beacon. And it just came home even harder. And the darkness got worse. And then one day I just wanted to hear her voice. And I ripped open the cassette, or the box that the CD was in, and I threw it in the machine, and I start hearing it. And then I hear her voice. And I hear her say, tell to the operator, tell Charlene I love her. I love you, Charlene. I love you. And I finally came to realize that she was telling me that I could be a light and a flame and a beacon.